Key punching bag swung back and forth wildly as a result of my assaults, but I didn't stop. I could feel the sting on my swathed knuckles as they collided with the hard leather of the bag, but that just made me punch harder. I didn't care about the bruises that were probably going to surface on my skin by tomorrow. Hey man, listen up. I heard my friend Marcus walk in. I just grunted in response, not bothering to stop my exhausting drill. I think that unfortunate punching bag has had quite enough. Marcus put in dryly. He finally ceased my workout and fixated Marcus with an irritated glare. Marcus didn't seem to mind though. Marcus was the only person who wasn't afraid of me. Instead of quaking under my glare like everyone else, Marcus chose to ignore it, which is why he was my only friend. You remember my cousin Liam, right? Marcus asked breezily. Yeah, so. Gus isn't affected by my clipped response either. So, a friend of his is throwing a party tonight. It's going to be pretty sick, the whole town's probably going to be there. He asked us to come. No, I replied coldly as I started doing my hand wraps. I'm not taking no for an answer. When was the last time you went out and partied, had a good time? In fact, when was the last time you even smiled? Marcus demanded. My face twisted into a scowl. Marcus was the only friend I had, but most of the time I just wished he'd leave me alone. I knew Marcus meant well, but that didn't make him any less exasperating. I don't party and I'll smile when I have a reason to. I replied in the same clipped tone. You're going to the party, Nate. I'm not, and there's no way in hell you're making me. My jaw was set as I concentrated on the road, my knuckles turning white as I clutched the steering wheel tightly. Marcus and I were currently seated in my pickup truck, heading for that party Marcus had been talking about. Wouldn't it have been easier if you just agreed to go in the first place? Marcus asked with a chuckle. I narrowed my eyes at him. Sometimes I seriously question you being my friend. He seethed. Nate, come on. Don't be like that. You threatened to kick me out of the apartment, I accused. It was a joke. I was trying to get you to go out and have fun. Marcus put in lightly. Marcus's explanation managed to piss me off even more. Then again, everything managed to piss me off. He reverted my attention back on the road. Stop here, it's a few blocks away from the party, but it's safer, in case the cops decide to burst in. Can make a run for it and get out without the cops noticing us or seeing the number plate. He's explained somewhat sheepishly. I just gave him a pointed look. The last thing I needed right now was a run-in with the authorities. He parked the truck in a deserted alleyway. The moon seemed to be the only source of light there. In the eerie quietness of the alley, I could hear the sound of blaring music from a distance as we made our way towards the house. The shuffling sound of feet nearby made us stop in our tracks. I looked around the deserted street. There seemed to be no sign of a living being besides the two of us. There it was again. It was definitely the sound of someone walking. It came from close by. My whole body tensed up. Were we being followed? Whoever you are, show yourself. Demanded, my hands clenched into fists. Suddenly a figure stumbled forward towards us from the shadow. I got ready to attack, taking up a fighting stance. Just as I was about to strike, I heard Marcus cry out. Nate! Don't. It's just a girl. My hand stopped in mid-air. I had to squint in the dim light to see properly. I was right, it was a girl. Shit. I cursed under my breath as I realized that I'd almost struck her. Something's wrong with her. Just got in. She was right. It wasn't hard to realize that something was definitely wrong with her. Her breathing was ragged and she seemed to be having trouble standing up. Help me. Girl whimpered as she started to sway. Marcus caught her before she hit the ground. What's wrong with her? I questioned uneasily. Having the girl's attire from her elaborate dress and jewelry, it was clear that she was dressed for the party. She's probably drunk. Marcus responded. I think someone spiked her drink. Alcohol doesn't do this. I observed. What do you suppose we do now? So let's just leave her here and go to the party. She's not our business anyway. Marcus answered. I gave him a glare. I was kidding. Let's take her to the party and leave her there. Someone's bound to recognize her. Leaving an unconscious girl at a party filled with hormonal drunk college boys, does that really sound like a good plan to you? I snapped. If you can think of anything else, then I'm all ears. It's not like we know where she lives. He snapped back. Celeste apartment complex. I live at the Celeste apartment complex. I heard the girl mumble suddenly. I gave Marcus a pointed look. Marcus sighed. I suppose that solves our problem. Being a gentleman tends to suck sometimes. I guess the party's going to have to wait. No, you go to the party. I'll take her. I affirmed. You sure? Yeah. Just help me put her in the truck. You're not going to come back to the party after you drop her off, are you? Marcus asked with a sigh. Just put her in the truck. The Nest apartment complex. I read the gold-plated sign aloud and I let out a low whistle. The complex was lavishly constructed. The huge black iron gates seemed to open automatically as the truck approached. Can I help you, sir? A uniformed guard stepped forward and asked politely. Yes, I'm here to drop off. I trailed off as I realized that I didn't know her name. The girl mumbled something incoherently. She was still unconscious. A friend. I finished awkwardly. The guard seemed to recognize the girl because he permitted me to proceed inside, but not before giving me a suspicious look. I parked my truck in the massive parking lot before stepping out and unlocking the door to the passenger seat. I cursed under my breath as the girl almost toppled to the ground when I did so. I picked the girl up in my arms and made my way towards the extravagant building. She couldn't help but be enthralled by my surroundings. But the place was beautiful, everything about it screamed of money, the marble fountains, the perfectly trimmed bushes. I made my way inside to the reception. I sighed in relief as I noticed a woman sitting behind the counter. "Excuse me, ma'am. I happened to come across this girl. She's unconscious. I believe she lives here." The woman studied me for a brief moment before her eyes wandered to the girl's limp from in my arms. "Oh yes, that's Allison Wyatt," she answered. Her voice sounded suspicious. I felt immensely relieved. "Thank God she lives here. Can you make sure she gets to her apartment safely? I need to get going." "She's not my business, honey." The woman cut it. "Excuse me. My shift's over. I'm leaving." I scoffed. "I thought you said she lives here." "I did, but that doesn't make her my problem. You brought her here, so you're responsible. I don't even know her." I gritted through clenched teeth. This woman was getting on my nerves. "Here," she snapped impatiently as she held out a key. "Here's this number 187. You expect me to carry her all the way to her apartment?" I demanded angrily. "Yes, it's on the 18th floor. Use the elevator." I wanted to strangle her so badly, but instead I just snatched the key. She was holding out with my free hand as I held Allison up with the other. I couldn't keep the scowl off my face as the elevator's doors opened and I got off the 18th floor. Finally, I reached the door labeled 187. I tried to unlock the door, but it was proving to be difficult, probably due to the fact that I was holding an unconscious girl in my arms. I cursed loudly as the key refused to go in. The sound of someone clearing their throat behind me caught my attention. My eyes met with a pair of big brown ones. "You need any help?" the girl asked cautiously. She eyed the unconscious girl in my arms with suspicion. "I got it," I responded gruffly. I'd always hated accepting help from others. It made me feel incompetent. "Okay," she sounded amused. "You know, it would probably be a lot easier if you weren't holding the key upside down." I grumbled when I realized that she was right. Quickly correcting my mistake, I unlocked the door and stepped in. The apartment was lavishly furnished like the rest of the complex. It didn't come as a surprise to me. I quickly placed Allison down on the huge L-shaped sofa and adjusted the cushions around her so she was comfortable. Leaving the key on the kitchen counter, I finally walked out of the apartment, shutting the door behind me quietly. To my surprise, the girl was still standing there. She eyed me curiously. I took in her toned frame. Her auburn hair was tied up into a ponytail. My attention was drawn back to her brown owl-like eyes. Her arms were crossed in front of her chest. I assumed it was something she did to appear intimidating. She had an air of confidence about her. For a moment I allowed my eyes to linger on her attractive form. "Care to explain how that happened?" she asked me brazenly. For some reason I found it rather annoying. Her voice sounded accusatory. "Nothing much to explain. Had her unconscious, so I brought her home." I responded with a scowl. It wasn't like I owed her any explanation. She gauged my expression, trying to figure out if I was lying, but my face stayed impassive, betraying no emotion. Finally she gave up and let out a sigh. "If that is the case, then that was really considerate of you," she said softly. Scratched my neck awkwardly. I'd never been particularly good with compliments. "Nice place you got here," I finally said, trying to change the subject. "Thanks." Not bothering to say anything else, I started to make my way towards the elevator. It was getting late and I needed to leave. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside. To my surprise, the girl stepped in after me. I hadn't even noticed her following behind. She was stalking me now. "I'm going to the library. I've got a lot of studying to do," she told me when she saw the questioning look on my face. I nodded, satisfied with her explanation. She pressed the button for ground floor and the elevator started moving. "Is it always this deserted?" I asked after a while, breaking the silence. I found it strange that the whole complex seemed to be empty. I hadn't seen any people walking around, or heard any noise altogether. The place seemed to be uninhabited. "The complex is mostly occupied by college students. All of them have gone to attend some party." "How come you're not at the party?" "I'm not much of a party person," she admitted. I smiled at that. That made two of us. "You go to college here?" I asked, curiosity getting the best of me. "Tomorrow's my first day, actually. I just moved here." The elevator doors drew open and we both stepped out into the lobby. We continued to walk in silence towards the parking lot. I found myself looking back in her direction once I'd reached my truck. "I could drop you off at the library if you want," I found myself asking before I could stop myself. I was surprised I'd actually asked her that. What had I been thinking? The library was in the opposite direction from my apartment. She looked taken aback by my offer. "No thanks. In my own car," she answered quickly, motioning towards the sleek red Lamborghini parked a few feet away. "Good," I replied, my voice cold. I got into my truck and started the ignition. To my surprise, I'd actually felt a pang of disappointment when she declined my offer. I didn't look back as I drove off. I groaned in annoyance when I heard someone banging the front door. What time was it? I grabbed my phone and squinted at the screen. It read 6 a.m. I groaned again. Marcus, will you please go get the damn door? I yelled. There was no response. The banging seemed to get louder. Begrudgingly, I got out of bed. He was ready to kill the bastard who had made me wake up this early. I clenched my jaw in annoyance as I saw Marcus passed out in the hall. I was surprised he had managed to make it home from the party last night. I yanked the door open, ready to give whoever it was a piece of my mind. But who I saw standing outside made me stop short. In front of me stood the police officer. Daniel Cohen, one of them asked. That's me. I responded coldly, all traces of sleep gone. You're coming with us. The policeman ordered. What for? I demanded evenly. You're under arrest for the murder of Allison Wyatt. Chapter 2, Accusation. And my love for you is bulletproof. But in the end, you were the one who shot me. I didn't kill her, I shouted angrily for what seemed like the 100th time. To say I was pissed would have been an understatement. They'd dragged me out of my apartment without even giving me a proper explanation of any sorts. I'd been sitting here in this cramped-up interrogation room for the past 2 hours. These idiot cops were getting on my nerves. They kept asking me pointless questions, making me repeat myself over and over again. The door burst open and a middle-aged stern-looking man walked in. I'll take it from here, boys. He ordered. The 2 police officers who'd been interrogating me seemed beyond relieved. He's all yours, detective. Good luck with this one. And one of the police officers declared as they both scurried out of the room. The man took a seat right across from me. I'm Detective Miller. He introduced himself casually. I gave him a blank look. I'd introduce myself too, but I assume you already know everything about me. The detective laughed, waving off my bitter tone. And call me John if that makes you more comfortable. I just continued to glower at him. Come on, Nate, be reasonable. You cooperating would make things a lot easier for the both of us. I've already told those 2 officers everything I know. I grew out. Why don't you tell it to me again? The detective countered. I ran a hand through my hair tiredly. I really just wanted to get out of this place and go home. I found the girl when I was heading to this party with my friend at some kid's place. Where was this party exactly? Someplace down at Cedar Street. Okay, continue. He encouraged. Like I said, we found the girl in one of the alleyways at the back. She was in pretty bad shape, almost passed out. Was she drunk? I'm not sure. Alcohol doesn't usually influence a person that way, not unless it's consumed in an extremely large amount. I admitted. Are you saying that someone drugged her? Look, I'm not an expert. I don't know what happened to her, I'm just saying it's a possibility. The detective nodded as he took in the information. Tell me what happened next, mate, he asked. I couldn't just leave an unconscious girl in the middle of the street, so I drove her home. She was still unconscious, so I had to carry her to her apartment. The receptionist had already given me the key, so I unlocked the door and put her on the sofa. I left her apartment immediately after that. I don't know what happened next. All I know is that I didn't kill her, I spat out. Did you see anyone else while you were there? John asked seriously. Not really. The whole place seemed deserted. There was this one girl though. I met her outside in the hallway. She seemed to know Allison. Do you know the girl's name? No, one never asked. She had brown hair, brown eyes. She wasn't very tall, but not too short either. He recalled. The detective seemed to be lost in thought. Suddenly he started going through the files placed before him. Finally his eyes caught a photograph. He took it out and held it up for me to see. Is this her by any chance? I studied the picture before finally nodding my head. That was the girl, all right. For some reason, I hadn't been able to get her out of my head since last night. That's her. Her name is Verena Dawson. She lives in the apartment across from Allison's. She's the first person we questioned about the murder. A thought suddenly occurred to me. She saw me leave. She can testify to that. I left the apartment complex before the murder happened. She's a witness to that. Why don't you ask her? She'll tell you. The detective studied me seriously. Like something didn't seem to add up. He said cautiously, Ms. Dawson is the one who told us you were the murderer. What? I demanded furiously. What John was saying made no sense. Verena had seen me drop Allison off and leave. Why on earth would she try to accuse me? The detective sighed, clearly frustrated. Miss Dawson was the one who found the body. She told us how she saw you with Allison's unconscious body the night before and that she believed you were the one who killed her. I let out a groan in agitation. She'd so convinced to me. How did she know who and where I was? I never gave her my name. That's actually the amusing part. You see, she was clever enough to note down the number plate of your truck. She handed your license plate number to the police and our boys did the rest. I was livid. That girl actually had the nerve. The girl I'd seen the night before was actually trying to frame me for a crime I didn't commit. She had clearly seen me leave, but instead of trying to clear my name, she was trying to frame me. Let me ask you a question, John. I countered as I leaned forward across the table. You're accusing me of murder because I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. For a second I can pretend I get that. But how come I'm the only suspect here? This girl Verena, or whatever her name is, she was there last night too. How come she's not here? John sighed like he knew this wasn't going to be easy. Let me just cut to the chase here, mate. You found your fingerprints all over Allison's body, on her door, on her apartment keys. We also have footage of you carrying her unconscious body to her apartment. Unfortunately, the security cameras are installed inside the apartment, so we don't know what you were doing while you were inside. Nobody went in or came out after that. As for the answer to your question about Miss Dawson, we did check and she was in fact at the library like she told us. Her alibi checks out. I already told you the reason for all of those things. The girl was unconscious. I took her home. What was I supposed to do? Just leave her on the street? My friend Marcus must have told you the same thing when you questioned him. My explanation is authentic and you have no proof to claim otherwise. He growled. The detective studied me wordlessly for a few moments before he spoke again. You know what surprises me the most? He asked. That someone actually shot an innocent girl in her apartment, yet not a single soul heard or saw it happen. It wasn't until the morning that the body was discovered. A gunshot is bound to draw some attention. Even if the murderer used a silencer with his gun, it'd still make enough noise, especially since the windows were open. The whole complex seemed to be deserted last night. I wondered out loud. Almost nobody was home, and it's like the murderer knew that. Yes, indeed. John responded as he gauged my reaction. Look, I know you can't arrest me until you acquire some real evidence to against me, like a gun, something that proves I actually committed the murder. Do you bet you had no luck finding a weapon when you searched the house in my truck? You're not going to find anything on me. Why don't you stop wasting time and focus on finding the real killer instead of trying so hard to pin this on me? I spat out angrily. And sighed. I'd like to believe you, Nate. I really would. But considering your past record, I think it's safe to say that you are a prime suspect right now. He leaned back in his chair casually, but his eyes never left mine. Tell me, how long has it been since the last time you were here? 3 years, 4, except that time you had been behind bars, hadn't you? You were a violent teenager. He finished calmly. I clenched my jaw so tightly that it almost hurt. I could feel my anger flaring up again. That was one time, I spat out. I don't blame you. I mean, it's totally understandable given your past history. You didn't have it easy as a kid. How's your mother now, by the way? Be very careful about what you say next. I spoke at a low voice. My tone was menacing. That guy would shut up if he knew what was best for him. Threatening me won't make this any easier. I continued to glare at him. Either let me go right now or let me call my attorney. I'm done talking. I knew that John couldn't hold me here for long. Even though all the evidence they come across pointed toward me, it still wasn't enough to charge me of murder. They needed proof. Real proof. And until they found it, they had no choice but to let me go. Okay, you're free to go. John finally replied. I stood up abruptly. I couldn't stand to be in this suffocating room any longer. As I started to make my way towards the door, I heard John speak up again. You may not have enough proof right now, but let me assure you, we will not rest until the murderer is behind bars. You slip up just once and you end up in jail again, this time for good. I suggest you enjoy the few moments you have left as a free man. We will not rest until justice has been served. His voice was cold. Although the detective had said no such thing directly, I knew he was accusing me. He believed I was the killer and that they just needed to find enough proof to arrest me. Good luck to you then. I said calmly before walking out. I took in a few calming breaths when I finally stepped outside. There wasn't a place in this world which I hated more than a police station. I let out a frustrated sigh. To believe this was actually happening to me. I didn't think of myself as a good man. Hell, I knew I wasn't a good man. But I also knew that I didn't kill her. Right now I was being accused of a crime I didn't commit. Just the thought of someone killing an innocent girl repulsed me. By the looks of it, it seemed that the police were more concerned with finding proof to arrest me rather than finding the real killer. I made up my mind. I would have to find the murderer myself so I could clear my name. And I knew just where to start. Verena Dawson. Chapter 3, Encounter. It's wrong what they say about the past. I've learned about how you can bury it. Because the past always claws its way out. Tilid Hosayini. Kept my eyes locked on the red Lamborghini in front. I'd been on Verena's tail since the past 2 hours. Fortunately, she hadn't noticed me or my truck. I was starting to get frustrated now. She hadn't done anything out of the ordinary even once. I wasn't about to give up though. I was going to keep digging till I found something. I knew that the town I lived in was peaceful. Any sort of violence was out of the ordinary. Yet, as soon as Verena had moved here, someone had been murdered. I didn't believe in coincidences. My gut told me that there was a lot more to this girl than what met the eye. The Lamborghini in front abruptly swerved right. I cursed under my breath as I almost missed the turn. The car stopped in front of a building. The board in front read, Firearms and Training Center. I felt my curiosity spike up. What was a girl like her doing at a shooting range? Cautiously, I stepped out of my truck. I pulled the hood of my jacket over my head and followed her inside. She seemed to be familiar with her surroundings, like she'd been here before many times. Then my eyes never left her form as she confidently walked towards the shooting area. She dropped her duffel bag on the floor, and to my surprise she picked up a rifle from the counter when she reached the range. She watched from a safe distance. I observed her as she took aim. Her form was perfect. She definitely knew what she was doing. Watched as she fired shot after shot, the bullets never missing the target. This girl knew how to use a gun better than most men. I watched as she shot at the target relentlessly. She was too absorbed in her actions to take notice of me. She had a determined look on her face, like nothing else in the world mattered. But what bothered me was the fact that every time a bullet hit the target, a small smile would appear on her face, like she enjoyed the whole concept of it. I knew what I had to do. I didn't have a lot of time to do it. Slowly, I walked towards her duffel bag, which she had placed a few feet away. She still hadn't taken any notice of me. After rummaging through the contents, I finally found what I'd been looking for. A key. I drove to the apartment complex. To my relief, the guard who approached me wasn't the same one who'd been there when I dropped Allison off. "I'm here to book an apartment," told the guard casually. He seemed to believe me because he let me pass. As soon as I stepped inside, I strode to the elevator and pressed the button for the 18th floor. The detective had told me that Verena lived in the apartment across from Allison's. I remembered that Allison's had been number 187. I walked down the hall uncertainly until I reached the door labeled 187. The police tape wound across the door confirmed that it was in fact Allison's apartment. I tried the door to the one across from it, which I assumed was Verena's apartment. I wasn't surprised when it turned out to be locked. I took out the key which I had taken from her bag and tried it in the lock. To my great relief, it fit. Finally, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was mostly bare. The only pieces of furniture seemed to be a huge black sofa and a flat-screen television. The Polaroid picture stuck to the wall confirmed that it was Verena's apartment. At least she hadn't been lying when she said she'd just moved in. I felt too as I eyed the stack of unpacked boxes. There's got to be something here. Some clue linking her to the murder. I muttered under my breath. I made my way into what seemed to be her bedroom. Besides a bed and a wardrobe, the room was completely empty. I decided to start with the wardrobe. I rummaged through the contents quickly, hoping to find any sort of evidence. Just as I was about to give up, as I caught something small and shiny. It was a bullet. He smiled in triumph. A bullet was definitely a crucial piece of evidence. If she had bullets, she had a gun in here too, and if she had a gun, she could have used it to kill Allison. Now, I just had to focus on finding it. I placed the bullet in my pocket and continued with my search. I had been so busy looking for the weapon that I didn't hear the sound of the door being yanked open. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" a familiar feminine voice demanded. I froze. Slowly, I turned around and my eyes met with Verena's furious brown ones. I glared at her evenly. "I believe you killed Allison. I'm here so I can find evidence to prove that," he retorted, not bothering to hide my suspicions. She looked completely bewildered at first, but then her expression became stone cold. She let out a humorless chuckle. "And what makes you think that?" My voice trembled with anger as I spoke. "I don't think it's a coincidence that someone just happened to get murdered as soon as you moved here. That too in the apartment right across from yours. I've seen you with a gun. I know you're more than capable of using it to kill someone. Gee, let me praise you for coming up with such a brilliant strategy. Telling the police I was the murderer, throwing them off your trail. Then again, who wouldn't believe a helpless little college girl, right? Too bad I know who you really are." "That's a really nice theory," Verena remarked sarcastically. "It's a pity you didn't find anything to prove it." "How are you so sure I didn't find the weapon?" I challenged. "Because," she trailed off casually. Before I had time to register what was going on, she had reached into her bag and pulled out a gun. "You didn't find it, because I have it right here." My hands balled into fists. This girl had no idea who she was dealing with. "What's a pretty little girl like you doing with such a dangerous toy?" I taunted. I could see a spark of anger ignite in her eyes at my words. "Don't test me. I will shoot you," she threatened. I barked out a laugh, not feeling threatened the slightest. "Go ahead and shoot me, sweetheart. Just like you shot Allison. Only this time you won't get away with it. I can tell them it was self-defense. Hallway cameras have already caught you breaking in. The police will believe a helpless little college girl." "Right," Verena countered back. "Oh, she was good all right. Too bad I was better." I chuckled coldly. "I'm impressed, Verena." "You really think like a real murderer." "Go to hell," she spat out. I could feel my lips curling into a smirk as I advanced towards her. "Oh, I will, sweetheart, and I'll make sure I drag you down there with me. Don't come any closer, or I'll shoot," she warned, but even as she spoke, she edged back slowly. "Then shoot me." I responded smoothly as I took another step towards her. Her feet seemed to move back on their own accord. She still had the gun trained in my direction, but her hands were starting to shake. She was scared of me. "Good, she should be. I'm not afraid of you," she mumbled feebly as I kept moving towards her. How adorable. She was afraid, all right. I could see the fear etched across her featured. I'd have felt sorry for her if I had feelings, that is. "Oh really?" I mocked. With that being said, I lunged forward. Before she could even contemplate what was happening, I had yanked her arm back, forcing her to drop the gun. Suddenly she was pinned against my chest. I could feel her trembling lightly as she struggled uselessly against my strong hold. "Let go of me," she muttered through clenched teeth. I don't think so, Todd jeered as I tightened my grip. Now tell me, Verena. Is this the gun you used to kill Allison? I demanded. I didn't kill her, she spat out furiously. Sure you didn't. I didn't shoot her. You're really an idiot if you actually believe I did. You talk about the murder so casually like it's no big deal. A normal girl would have been a quivering mess if someone had been killed in the apartment across from hers. I growled. Maybe I'm not one of those normal girls. She snapped back. I could feel her body heaving against mine as she tried to catch her breath. For a moment I was distracted by that. I quickly cleared my head, returning my focus on the situation. I almost laughed when I realized what she'd said. I knew by now that this girl was far from normal. You're right, a normal girl wouldn't shoot someone. I mocked. Verena sighed in agitation. Why don't you take a closer look at the gun? Scoffed, but I eyed the gun, which was now lying on the ground anyway. What was she getting at? It's a taser gun, he said, answering his unspoken question. What? Verena let out a frustrated groan. It's a taser gun, it doesn't really classify as a murder weapon, does it? Good lie, I said coolly. I'm not, you can check it if you don't believe me. I debated about whether or not he should believe her. Finally, I let her go and quickly darted towards the weapon. Sure enough, it was a taser gun. I cursed under his breath as I clutched it in my hand. Where's the gun you used to kill her? I shouted as he threw the gun across the room harshly. It collided with the wall before hitting the ground with a loud crash. Verena eyed me warily. She massaged her arm, which was obviously hurting, and undoubtedly due to the tight grip I'd held her in earlier. I had hurt her. I felt a pang of guilt pierce through my heart at the thought. I had never hurt a girl before. I quickly shook the unfamiliar feeling away. Even if I did kill her, which I didn't, I wouldn't be stupid enough to hide the weapon here. She hissed. I gave her a menacing glare. I'm going to prove that you killed her, one way or another. You better be very careful because I'll be watching you. I'll make sure you end up behind bars. I sneered. Get out, she retorted evenly. I didn't break my glare as I made my way towards the door. Hun, you're going to regret ever messing with me, he snarled as I walked past her. Rage consumed me. She was going to regret ever trying to pin this on me. I would make sure of it. He was angry and I knew it was clouding my judgment. I could feel something bothering me in the back of my mind. I'd been too harsh with her. She was just a girl after all. What if she was telling the truth? As soon as these thoughts entered my mind, I quickly pushed them away. Why was I sympathizing with her? I'd never really cared about anyone before, so why now? Besides, she was the one who was trying to frame me of a crime I hadn't committed. I knew she was hiding something and I was going to find out what it was, one way or another. I curled my fingers around Bullet in my pocket, the only useful thing which I had found in her apartment earlier. She definitely wasn't as innocent as she looked. All of my thoughts were once again consumed by her. It was Verena Dawson. Why had she come here and what was she hiding? He was going to find out. As I drove away, my eyes started to the review mirror. I eyed the lavish complex shrinking behind me as I moved forward. An unnerving feeling settled down in the pit of my stomach. For some reason I felt like this was far from over. In fact, it had all just started. Something was going to happen. Something bad. And I couldn't shake off the notion that Verena and I were going to be the center of it all, whether we liked it or not. Chapter 4, Savior. And if you ever feel lonely, just look at the moon. Someone somewhere is looking at it too. Verena. I stepped into the lobby and made my way to the reception. I scrunched up my face in confusion when I saw an unfamiliar woman sitting behind the desk. As if she had sensed my skepticism, the woman gave me a reassuring smile, her green eyes crinkling at the corners. I'm Belinda. You must be Verena. Just moved here, right? She asked kindly. Yes, I responded a little uncertainly. Belinda's smile didn't falter. And the receptionist. I was away for a few days because I wasn't feeling too well, so my friend Hannah was filling in for me. That's the reason you haven't seen me here before. I see. Hope you feel better now, he said, giving the lady a warm smile. I'm absolutely fine now, darling. How do you like the complex so far? It's beautiful, I told her truthfully. About your apartment, is it to your liking? Belinda inquired. Yes, everything's great. I actually came down here because I needed a favor, I said, a little embarrassed. Belinda gave me an encouraging nod. I can't seem to find my apartment key anywhere. I probably misplaced it. I was told that I could get a spare from the reception. You most certainly can. What's your apartment number? She asked kindly. 1088, I responded. She gave the receptionist a grateful smile as I finally took the key from her. The truth was that I hadn't been able to locate my key ever since that man had broken into my apartment yesterday. Just thinking about him made me shudder. I had never felt so helpless in front of a person before. I'd always prided myself on being strong and lithe, but he had managed to make me feel like a worthless bag of mush. I'd never seen anyone move that fast. He disarmed and restrained me before I could even catch a breath. He had no doubt in my mind that if he wanted to, he could have snapped my neck in the blink of an eye. I let out a shaky breath as I made my way outside. The last thing I wanted was to be late for college. The cold air bit into my skin as I walked out the gates of the apartment complex. I let out an agitated sigh. I hadn't been able to sleep a wink since the past few days, ever since I'd found Allison's bloodied, lifeless body that day. I shuddered when I recalled the awful memory. She sinbad's my pace, taking longer strides. Although I owned a car, I preferred to walk. It felt good to exercise my limbs in the morning, and the fresh air always helped me clear my head. The college was buzzing with life as usual as I made my way through the crowded hallway towards my first class. The classroom was already crowded when I got there. I made my way to the very end of the class and put my bag down, choosing to take the seat in the far corner of the class. I was determined to stay out of the spotlight. Before moving here, I had promised myself that I'd draw as little attention towards myself as possible. I needed to focus on the real reason why I come here. Hey kitty. Haven't seen you around. A masculine voice squeaked, pulling me out of my thoughts. I just rolled my eyes and chose to ignore whoever it was. I made it endure in my seat, by the way. I rolled my eye. Tell I den. I got here first and now this is my seat. He retorted haughtily. I heard his hearty chuckle. Finally, I looked up and my eyes met with a pair of green ones. Took in his appearance. He was definitely attractive, with his blonde hair and jade eyes. His tall and lean frame practically towered over mine. You're right, I surrender. This seat is all yours, madam. He responded playfully. For some reason I couldn't help but think that he reminded me of someone, but I couldn't seem to figure out who. So, I didn't catch your name? Aiden asked casually. That's because I didn't give it to you. I countered. He clutched his chest dramatically, beaming her. You well, me. I couldn't stop my face from breaking into a smile. I was about to give him a response when another voice broke in. Don't let him get to you, he likes to annoy everyone. I turned around to see that it was a pretty girl with shoulder-length brown hair who had spoken. She smiled at me sweetly, showing off her dimples. Correction, I like to annoy pretty girls. Aiden added with a wink. The girl just rolled her eyes at him. I could tell that they'd been friends for a long time. I'm Skylar. She introduced herself. Verena. I responded with a grin. I knew that I wasn't supposed to get involved with anyone over here, but I couldn't help but like the two of them. The teacher walked in and everyone suddenly started rushing to their seats. Aiden took the seat in front of me while Skylar took the one beside me. You're having lunch with us today. Aiden turned to look at me with a playful smile. I was about to respond when I noticed the huge bruise on the side of his face. What happened to your face? I blurted out the question. I noticed that his smile faltered. Ethan Grant. He responded grimly before he turned away to look in front. Ethan is the biggest douchebag in this college. He thinks he owns the place because his dad's the dean. He likes to beat people up for fun. Tyler put in bitterly. He could feel my face contorting in disgust. What kind of a creep beat people up for fun? Maybe I could teach him a lesson or two. Hey Verena, wait up. I heard Skylar's breathless voice call out from behind. I paused, waiting for her to catch up. Did you hear about Allison Wyatt? Skylar practically screamed when she reached me. I winced when I noticed that a few people turned around to look at us. Yeah, she lived in the same apartment complex as me. I chose not to mention that she had actually lived in the apartment just across mine. Oh my god, really? Is it true then? Did she get murdered in her apartment 2 days ago? I'm afraid so. I shuddered as I was once again forced to recall the gory memory. I heard that the suspected murderer is Nate Cohen. No surprise there, Skylar added solemnly. My interest spiked up. Nate Cohen? Could she be talking about the same man who I'd seen with Allison's unconscious body that night and the one who'd broken into my apartment earlier? So, who is this Nate Cohen? I asked, trying to sound casual. No one knows much about him, just that he used to go to college here a few years back and he got kicked out because he put some dude in a coma. He got out of jail a while later and he's been pretty low-key ever since. All I know is that he lives with a friend of his here somewhere. Do you know what he looks like? I might have seen him, it's a pretty small town. He asked, not bothering to keep the curiosity from my voice. I've only just seen him once myself, at a department store if I recall correctly. A few months ago. He's tall, chiseled, really well built. He's pretty hot if you come to think about it. Very but hot. And again, Ted Bundy was hot and he was a serial killer. Skylar rambled. She's definitely talking about the same guy. I thought to myself. Do you want me to give you a drive home? Skylar asked when she noticed me walking away from the direction of the parking lot. No thanks. A walk will do me good anyway. I'm reassured. Isn't it scary though, like someone got murdered in your apartment complex? Aren't you afraid the killer might come back? She asked after a while. I know how to protect myself and besides I paid a lot of money to get this apartment, no turning back now. I responded smoothly. So maybe I was a little nervous, but I didn't have to tell her that. Well, in case you ever change your mind, you could always crash at my place. My folks live abroad and I have the whole place to myself. I could really use a roommate. I'll keep that in mind. Didn't giving Skylar a smile before finally heading out the gates. Tightened my blazer around myself as I made my way towards the apartment complex. The air had an eerie sting to it. Although it was just mid-Fotrumph and the temperature seemed to be exceptionally low. My thoughts were a scattered mess. I didn't know what to think of all the information Skylar had given me. For some reason I couldn't stop thinking about that man. There was something about him. Something that drew me in. The day I'd found Allison's body, the first thing I'd done was call the police and tell them that I suspected that Nate was the murderer. At that time it had made perfect sense. I'd seen him carry Allison's limp body inside the apartment. He had the key. Even Skylar had told me today that he had a history of violence. How the evidence seemed to point towards him. Yet there was something that bothered me. I had a hard time grasping that he was a murderer. Yesterday when he broke into my apartment, he could easily have killed me or hurt me, yet he didn't. He seemed to be dead set on clearing his name. I was still absorbed in my thoughts when suddenly I felt myself being knocked to the ground harshly. Before I could contemplate what had happened, I felt a gloved hand clamp down over my mouth. Finally, regaining my senses, I began to struggle wildly. The man yanked at my hair, pulling my head back painfully. "Where's Trevor?" his raspy voice demanded. His eyes widened in realization. Somehow I managed to twist free of his strong grasp. I quickly got to my feet and took up a fighting stance. I eyed that man standing in front of me. He was huge with bulging muscles. The hood of his jacket was drawn over his head, making it impossible to make out his face. "How do you know Trevor?" I demanded. The man chuckled coldly. I aimed a kick towards his groin, but he was too quick for me. Before my foot could even make contact with his body, his arm lashed out. His hand wrapped around my ankle. He yanked my foot forward, making me lose my balance and causing me to topple to the ground again. He kicked me in the stomach, making me double over in pain. My eyes scanned my surroundings desperately, hoping to find anyone who could help me, but the street was completely deserted. "Oh, me!" kicked me again, making me cry out in pain. My vision was starting to get blurry. I was running out of time and I knew it. He made a weak attempt to get up again, but the man only snorted. He pushed me to the ground roughly and pinned me down. Still couldn't make out what he looked like. The hood was drawn too far over his face.